Saving $1 million in your retirement accounts is exceptionally rare. Only 4.7% of US households ever reach that milestone. But saving over $2 million? Whee! That puts you in rarefied air. Less than 2% of US households ever get there. And in today's video, I'm going to be taking the median 401k balance by age and showing you how you can go from that balance to over $2 million saved by the age of 64. So a little disclaimer, most people do not need to save nearly this much money to actually retire comfortably. In fact, most people retire on substantially less money. You don't actually need as much money as you think you do to retire comfortably. So if your annual expenses are low because your housing costs are covered, you aren't paying for a vehicle, then you don't need as much money. And if some of that money is being taken care of with Social Security, that brings that number down even further. But the goal of today's video is to have a lavish, luxurious retirement. So I'm going to show you how to go from the median 401k balance to a $2 million retirement. So why did I pick the median? The reason I picked the median is because it's more representative of the average American. If you look at average, it can skew based on the high income earners and people who are super savers. Imagine you're standing in a room with Elon Musk. There could be 20 people, 30 people, 40 people in this room, and the average net worth of that room is going to be billions of dollars because Elon Musk is standing there. But if you do median, it sorts the data set from lowest to highest, and whatever value is in the middle is the median. So you're getting a more representative number of what the average American has in their account. And I don't really want to cheat this process. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some back tests using some market portfolios, and we're not going to use any of the survivorship bias. We're not just going to go back in time and invest in Bitcoin. We're not going to go back in time and invest in NVIDIA. We're going to try and just use broad market funds, index funds, funds that trade certain sectors and ideas, because it's hard to cheat if you're just using market level performance. And the other thing that we're not going to do is we're not going to assume that market performance goes back before the inception of those funds. So if a fund didn't exist 30, 40 years ago, we're not going to use that fund. We're just going to assume S&P 500 level returns until that fund actually comes into existence. And the funds that we're going to be using, I actually gave some recommendations for this in my retirement riches video that I put out last week. I went through ways that you could build retirement portfolio since my company is going to be rolling out a 401k self-directed option. So you could build portfolios like this in retirement accounts if your company also has some sort of self-directed 401k option. It's probably one of the best benefits that most people do not take advantage of. And the other thing to note is that if you leave your employer and you go and you work for someone else, those 401k funds from your previous employer, you can roll them over into a rollover IRA and you can self-direct the funds the way you please. Having the ability to elect what your money is actually invested in is very, very powerful. And it can be the difference between a multi-million-dollar retirement and wondering if you're ever actually going to be able to retire at all. So what are these median numbers that we're working with? What is the basis of our analysis here? So these median numbers are coming from Vanguard's How Americans Save data from 2024. And these median values have probably come up in the last couple of years, but we're using values from 2024. So if you're under the age of 25, the median balance was $2,816. If you're 25 to 34, the median balance was $14,933. If you're between 35 and 44, the median balance was $35,537. And if you're between 45 and 54, the median balance was $60,763. Now, when I do this analysis, I'm going to assume that we're starting at the far end of those bands. So we'll be looking at ages 25, 34, 44, and 54. Because the longer you have in the market, the less money that you have to save. And the easier it is going to be to hit that $2 million. See, the thing about it is compounding is going to do 90% of the work here. You're going to see as we do this analysis that you don't actually have to contribute that much money to hit $2 million. You just need to keep it invested over the long term and never pull it out. So we will contribute money, but we're not actually going to contribute that much. So let's start with the under 25. So if we start with under 25, we are going to have to use 18 years of just straight S&P 500 data, and then we'll have another 21 years using my 80/20 portfolio that I highlighted in my other video. And the reason we're going to have to do that is because the gold fund that I use in my 80/20 portfolio, IAU, didn't exist until 2005. So if we want to go back the 39 years that it's going to be required to analyze from age 25 to age 64, we're going to have to use the S&P 500 for that first 18 years. So it's a pretty safe assumption that the S&P 500 is going to give you around 10%. The S&P 500 has been getting around 10% returns since the inception of the S&P 500. So we're going to assume for the first 18 years that you're contributing $100 a month and you're getting 10% returns a year. So we're just going to be using a simple compounding calculator. So we'll start off with our starting balance, which is $2,816. Monthly contributions of $100. Then we're going to go for 18 years. And then we're assuming that 10% annual growth. And then we're going to compound it annually. So you can see after that 18 years, we're sitting on $70,375. Now we're going to go over to one of my favorite tools. It's Testfolio. It lets you backtest further than 10 years in the past without some sort of subscription. Most of the time, I like to use Portfolio Visualizer, but unless you pay for the paid subscription tier of Portfolio Visualizer, you can't go back more than 10 years. But Test.folio, it will let you test even further back into the past. So we're at Test.folio. We've loaded 2 portfolios. So the first portfolio is our 80/20 portfolio that I showed you in my retirement riches video. And then we're showing you a variant of that 80/20 portfolio where it's actually just 100% equities. It's a 50-50 split of VGT and SMH. So the three things in this portfolio are VGT, which is Vanguard's Information Technology Fund, which is kind of similar to the NASDAQ 100, but it actually gets slightly better returns than the NASDAQ 100, and it's been doing so for over 20 years now. And then we have SMH, which is actually a semiconductor ETF. And then IAU is gold. So this 80-20 portfolio is 80% equities and 20% gold. And then this other portfolio is just a 50-50 split between semiconductors and tech. So we're going to put in our starting balance here. So 70,375. We're going to add $100 every single month, and then we're going to backtest. And you can see we blew this goal out of the water. That 80-20 portfolio, we finished with almost $2.7 million. And if we were 100% equities that whole time in that portfolio, we finished with almost $3.2 million. So our total contributions across that entire time frame was just $46,800.
How? Hold on, bro. How?
Incredible, right? This shows you the power of compounding. So now we're moving on to our age 25 to 34 age bracket. And like I said, the median 401k balance for this age bracket is $14,933. So once again, we're going to be going for 30 years here to get to age 64. So 9 years of this, we're going to have to use market returns. And then the other 21, we can actually use our 80-20 portfolio. So we'll plug in our starting amounts, $14,933, monthly contributions of $100. The duration is 9 years. We're compounding at 10%, and then we're going to calculate it. So that's $51,506. We're going to take this number. We're going to go over to Testfolio. We're going to change our starting value to 51,506. We're going to backtest. And once again, you can see that we crushed it. Our 80-20 portfolio, we finished with 2.116 million. And then if we were 100% equities, we finished with almost $2.5 million. Our total contributions across that time frame, about $36,000 after what our median balance was. Phenomenal returns with very minimal contributions. So now we're looking at the 35 to 44 age bracket. And what you'll see is that since you're starting a little bit later, you need to save a little bit more money, but not really that much more. So we're going to have 20 years from age 44 to age 64 to hit this 2 million. So we changed our starting date to 2006 to get our 20 years. We put in our starting value, which is the median 401k balance for that age bracket, which is 35,537. And I'm going to show you two different ways to hit this $2 million. So using the 80-20 portfolio and using the 100% equity portfolio. So if you use 100% equities, if you backtest it, you'll see that you only actually need to bump up your savings rate from $100 a month to $200 a month. And you hit just over $2 million by the time you're age 64. And if you wanted to use the more conservative 80/20 portfolio, you got to go from 200 a month to 300 a month. And you'll see that the 80/20 portfolio is just over $2 million, and that 100% equity portfolio is about 2.5. And you really didn't have to contribute all that much money to get to over $2 million. Using the more conservative portfolio, you had to put in a little bit more, about $72,000. And if you use the 100% equity portfolio, you got away with only putting in an additional $48,000. So now we're moving on to the hard one, the hardest time to actually try and catch up and hit $2 million saved. The age 44 to 54 age bracket. So assuming you start at age 54, you only have 10 years to age 64 to save $2 million. So how do we get there? So we're going to change our start date in this back tester to 2016. And then we're going to change our starting value to the median for this age group, which is $60,763. And then what you'll find is that you actually have to save way more money to get to your goals. So that 300 from the previous, you're a lot higher than that. You need to bump this number up to $1,400 a month. And if you do that, you'll see that the 100% equity portfolio just edges over $2 million in that time frame. And if you wanted to use the more conservative 80/20 portfolio, you're actually going to have to bump up your savings rate to $1,900 a month. And that would get your 80/20 portfolio just above the $2 million save rate. And if you were in the 100% equities, that'd be about $2.3 million. So I think this truly demonstrates the power of time and compounding. The earlier you start, the less money that you have to save. But one thing worth noting is that even at that $1,900 a month, you still aren't challenging the 401k pre-tax contribution limit. So in 2026, you can contribute over $24,500 pre-tax. So you didn't actually need to hit that contribution limit or do catch-up contributions to get to over $2 million saved by the age of 64. So none of this is financial advice. Obviously, you have to weigh your own risk profile, your own goals, make your own financial decisions. But what I am trying to demonstrate to you is that the distance between you and a multi-million-dollar retirement is a lot smaller than you think. You can take a median balance with a pretty modest savings rate and get to over $2 million saved if you have a self-directed option in your retirement account. And this is why I push so hard with my company to actually make that happen. And if your company has one and you are not utilizing it, you could be leaving millions of dollars on the table. And if you got something out of my video today, like the video, subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be trying to make you 1% better every day. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.
Understand the market, keep your vision on the prize, building up the wealth right in front of your eyes. Talk Higgins, yeah, we keep it moving. Talk Higgins, watch the wealth improving. Markets and the money, making sense of the math, helping you navigate the financial path. Talk Higgins, subscribe for the vision. Stay smart, stay invested. We out.